So we know that AI is being used in games. We know that generative AI specifically is being used in games. So Steam had basically made a tool where devs had to disclose whether or not they're using generative AI in their games. And now, Steam games disclosing generative AI use is up 800%, which is around 20% of all games released in 2025. 1 in 5 games being released each and every day has some level of AI. It doesn't have to be in your face. It doesn't have to be like the only type of asset that's being used, but in some way, shape, or form, there is some amount of AI. It doesn't even need to be like generative AI imagery. It could just be like AI generated text, for example. And then there are many games that are probably not disclosing that, even though they probably should. A game called The Alters that came out earlier this year, which got a lot of critics, got critical reception basically on Metacritic. Basically, they were caught using generative AI text in their game, and when you went to their Steam page previously, it didn't actually say that they disclosed that. So that's another thing altogether. But it's interesting to see where all of this is going, but also how frightening it is, because let's be real. If you're a gamer, you're probably not a fan of generative AI being used in your games. Because I know I don't. So yeah, according to analysis of generative AI games on Steam by Totally Human, which suggests, nice name, Totally Human, nearly 8,000 titles released on Steam disclose that they're using generative AI, compared to 1,000 a year ago. Oh, right. 1,000 games last year used generative AI. And so this year it's now around 8,000 so far. And we're only halfway through the year, mind you, which is basically 7% of the total Steam library. Wow. So 7% of every game on Steam, like if you take every game that's ever released on Steam since this platform launched, 7% of them have generative AI in them. And that's 20% of the games released this year. So that is insane to think about, because I don't know if you guys realize this, the amount of games released on Steam each year is constantly growing in an exponential rate. Usually it's 10 to 15 times as much the previous year. So it just keeps growing and growing and growing, and it just gets more and more insane as time goes on. So just think about that for a moment. It's also worth noting that Steam requires games that use generative AI in their development to disclose the use. Such disclosures are voluntary, so the actual number of games using generative AI is likely higher than 8,000, which is exactly what I was talking about before, that The Alters failed to mention that. I don't know if the Steam listing for The Alters has changed yet, but yeah, I just kind of wanted to mention that for sure. In addition to disclosing whether generative AI was used, developers must describe exactly how it's used. This then appears on the game store, a section called AI generated content disclosure, which I think is a great thing. But the thing is that it should be non-optional, and I feel like if people lie, they need to be put to task through some legal methods. And I feel like Steam are the only ones who can do that, but also Steam are incredibly laid back regarding some of these sorts of things, so that's probably worth keeping in mind as well. According to the analysis, 60% of generative AI disclosures so far are for virtual asset generation, so creation of characters, backgrounds, or art, which I feel like you could say was used by stuff like that was created by Midjourney. I forgot what ChatGPT's version of it was, stuff like that. Generative AI is also used for audio generation, text generation, marketing and promotional assets, and code generation. AI is also being used for flagging of offensive user-created content and generation of in-game content prompted by the player. Interesting. Steam currently doesn't make it possible to filter its games so that only those without AI-generated content can be viewed, but SteamDB has now added this feature, which is quite interesting to tell that SteamDB has added it, which is a third party rather than Steam themselves within Steam. According to this year's Game Developers Conference, or GDC survey, a majority, 52% of developers, reported working at companies that utilize generative AI tools. However, it appears that has gone up Curiosity has gone down. 9% of developers surveyed their companies were interested in generative AI tools, down from 15 last year. 27% said they have no interest using them, a 9-point increase from 2024. So hopefully less use it, but that's likely not going to happen or not going to be the case, because honestly, it is what it is at the moment, where generative AI is the genie in the bottle that's been taken out, and so at this point, it's highly unlikely that that genie from the bottle is going to be going back anytime soon. But with all of that being said, however, let me know what you guys think about all of this in the comments below. I personally am not a fan of generative AI being used in games that I play, and I don't know if you guys feel the same, because it feels kind of cheap, plasticky in that sense. I feel like you can kind of look at a bunch of stuff and be like, I like this, but I don't like that, and I can't tell or figure out why. And keeping in mind that generative AI is just taking content that's already been created by other people and repurposing it for themselves to some extent. Though sometimes that extent isn't immediately known, especially when considering that we've had reports of plagiarism through stuff like what's happening with the vibe of Bungie's Marathon, for example, being taken from an indie artist earlier on this year, when we knew that, that's basically what's kind of happening, that assets that have the same vibe are being taken from that indie artist, that are being followed by the art team from Bungie and being used in Marathon, just completely being lifted, including any jokes or references that are actually in the art itself. That being said though, let me know what you guys think about all of this in the comments below. Like the video if you liked it, subscribe to the channel. I'm aiming for 500 subs by the end of the year. With all that being said, I do upload every day, so I'll see you guys tomorrow.